All right, so we are a few minutes after 1 o'clock. Looks like we have a full group here. We have about 57 people who have joined, probably a few more who are still joining. Thank you all for being at the September version of our agency admin webinar. So I'm going to introduce just the few people who are on our team for today. We have Thaddeus Gassy here with us, Stephanie Grader, Sam Dubas, Michael Sheriff, and Curtis Hahn. Maybe go to the next slide, please. Oh.
Okay, so I think
they're
everybody
saying they can hear you, Stephanie.
can hear me except Glory. So I'll go ahead and continue. So on the agenda today, we are going to go over the training. Will cover, well, today's training is relevant for both Maricopa and Balance of State. We're going to be talking about the new coordinated entry workflow for coordinated entry points. We're also going to go over some required training for the new coordinated entry workflow. And then also we're going to go over some updated guidance for recording a client's location for street outreach. And Thaddeus is going to go ahead and do our webinar reminders. Oh wait, Thaddeus, you're on mute now.
I was on mute and I had a joke, but now it feels silly to share. So I'm just going to share the reminders. We're having a rough start, guys. Please be patient with us today. Please remember to share what you've learned today with any relevant staff at your agency. During this webinar, to ask questions, please use the Q&A function. Please try not to use the chat function unless you're really just trying to communicate something directly to someone else, because the Q&A function is how we run reports at the end to be able to follow up with the Q&A section on our follow-up documents. So the Q&A function, there's going to be a little button at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on how you have your Zoom layout created. And then we can answer those as we go along. Keep in mind that today's attendance is required, but we always make a recording available later. We email that the video links by the following Monday. That's going to be Monday, October 5th in this case. And any users not in attendance will have until Friday, October 9th to be able to complete the video and the quiz that come with that follow-up email. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Michael now. And
Good
like
afternoon.
we did, don't forget to unmute yourself. Okay, you're good.
Good afternoon. So a couple of announcements. First one is there will be a period of system maintenance. So beginning tonight, you'll get an email blast that will let you know, giving you step-by-step instructions for entering data. Period of system maintenance is from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Thursday, October 1st. Implementation of coordinated entry starts on October 1st. So give us a little time. Do not try to record any CE data between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. on Thursday, October 1st. The second announcement is training. Training will be available. CE training will be available starting October 2nd. It is required. Topics will be workflow documents, training videos, how to enter data for a CE point, how to enter data for a housing match team. Next slide. And entering data for a housing program. There is a deadline. So again, this is a required training. Will be available October 2nd. The deadline for all users with EDA access to a CE program or a housing program must be completed by October 16th. I would expect there be some questions about the required. So I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any right now. Again, new data elements will be in place on Thursday. So the sooner you get started on that training, the quicker you can get through the processes and begin and get ready to work. No other questions?
This has been something I'll just add here in for just a moment that we've been anticipating for quite a while with the HUD data elements for 2020 standards around coordinated entry. Our team has put in a whole lot of work in order to create the workflows around this and put pieces in the right places to make this easier for you all to enter information. So we're really excited that this is finally rolling out. But it is going to be a change that is affecting Balance of State and Maricopa as of October 1st. So the things that you're used to seeing are maybe shifted in a different place. Sam's going to give us an example of one of those workflows, what that looks like today. This is, we do have a question, and I can this one if you'd like. So a question that says, so for Balance of State, only coordinated access points, not housing resource specialists. In Balance of State, this is going to be relevant for coordinated access points, so your entry points, and for any housing programs related to Arizona Complete Health, but not all other housing programs. So the idea, again, just to reiterate what Michael is describing, we'll send a blast to you later today that's going to give the workflow document so that you can be a little bit more familiar with what is coming and have a step-by-step guide. And then October 1st is our goal, but October 2nd at the very latest in the morning, we'll have those videos available for you and send out a blast to let you know that the required training is now on our website.
Thank you, Glory. Sam will cover the training workflow for coordinated entry points today. There is another workflow for housing providers that will not be covered today. This training is an introduction only. So all users with EDA to CE points or housing programs will still need to complete the online training by watching the videos at hmisaz.org. No other questions? Sam?
Fantastic. Can you go to the next slide? So we'll have just 3 slides, just some general discussion points. Then I'll actually jump into the training site itself so we can take a short glance at the workflow. We do have a workflow document, as I already mentioned, that will be sent out, and we'll have those videos prepared by October 2nd, as has already been mentioned as well. But this will be kind of a brief overview so people can get an introduction and get familiar with the process before they see those documents and before they see those videos. But a couple questions I already come across regarding this, and Gloria's answered those, but this training is specific for any user who enrolls clients into a coordinated entry program. So AZCH and Balance of State, the primary 717 program and Balance of State, the Family Housing Hub, the single adult system, anyone who's actually enrolling clients and doing the initial assessment, regardless of any type of system, will be following this workflow. This is not for housing providers or aspiring to referrals or for making referrals for the housing match team. This is just the entry points and enrolling clients into the assessment. The biggest changes will be, there'll be 2 new sub-assessments. There are 2 new data standards. One's called the coordinated entry event and the coordinated entry assessment. And if you can go to the next slide, we'll take a look at the next, the entry event sub-assessment first. So just as a brief overview, the first new element will be the coordinated entry event. This is a sub-assessment, and it is used to record key events in the client's movement through the process. Basically, HUD wants us to track major steps in the client's movement through the assessment process and through coordinated entry, all the way from the entry point to referral to housing and so forth. There will be 2 types of events available in the sub-assessment. There's access events and referral events. The entry points will only be completing 1 access point per enrollment. And we'll jump into service point on the training side. We'll take a look at that more closely. But as you can see highlighted in that box, we're only focusing on the access events when we're enrolling clients into coordinated entry. The next sub-assessment, can you jump to the next slide? Thank you, is for the coordinated entry assessment. So this is not a sub-assessment which is actually considered a replacement for the VI SPDAT or any other method that used to assess clients. This is really a summation of the work that's already been done. So this is a HUD-defined way to say, this assessment has been completed, this is the type of assessment, and it's just an easier way. All local fields are still, in terms of the SPDAT or local questions, are still locally defined. This which provides a summation for the interaction with the client so that we can better understand, in aggregate, how our clients being served, what type of assessments are we providing the clients, and so forth. So from that, I'll probably jump into service point itself, and that way we can take a close look at the workflow. There'll be a few items we'll want to address, and this will open the floor for some more questions, which we definitely may have with any new process. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Sure thing.
Thank you. So actually, let me redo that so it's not blocking all of the windows. Okay, we should be seeing the service point site. Is everyone seeing the training site here? Perfect.
Yes.
So I've already gone ahead and I've EDA'd into our data quality user in a project already, an entry point project. And I've already pre-created a client, which we call cleverly the agency admin webinar. So I'm going to go to their profile. Those initial steps will be the same. You'll continue to go ahead and, as usual, create a household. With this process, HUD is interested in having the entire household enrolled in the coordinated entry program. So if it's a family of 5, you'll go ahead and complete the household and ensure you enroll all 5 clients into the enrollment or the entry point. In this case, we'll consider a single adult client. We'll complete the ROI. The dates will be slightly different, but this is something we're familiar with. I chose a balance of state flavor when doing the start date and end date here, but it is slightly different in Maricopa for sure. The entry exit, again, pretty standard. We'll go ahead and add the entry exit for the clients. It'll still be a type of HUD. And the UD assessment will still be there, it'll remain the same. And this is pre-filled out to a degree just so we can go past that, which we're all familiar with these data elements. The changes really come on the next 2 assessments. So the coordinated entry status and vulnerability assessment is now a standardized assessment between both Maricopa and Balance of States. So that will be the standard assessment across both continuums. Any custom questions for either SACE, AZCH, Family Housing Hub, or any other assessment system will be on a different assessment placed last. But the one we're reviewing here is the one that is universal to both continuums, and is definitely the one that we'll want to go ahead and take a look at. So we have a number of sub-assessments. Some of these are familiar and some of them are new. Now with the client contact sub-assessment. So as it says, this is we're going to add the client contact information. This just better allows us to have some information about the client and better be able to contact the client. Because if we're not able to contact that client, then if they do find themselves eligible for housing and so forth, if you can't contact a person, not able to receive those services. So definitely a critical piece there. And then some new things that we'll be looking at. So we have the current living situation. This is a field that has previously been completed by street outreach projects primarily, street outreach and path projects, but we'll also be recording the current living situation for the entry points coordinated assessment as well. We'll go ahead and click add, and we'll take a brief look at that. So as a note, we have the helpful header here, but this is for head of households and adults. So it does not need to be completed on minors or minor children there. We'll click add to this. If anyone does work street outreach, this should be pretty familiar, but we'll go through it just in case someone has not interfaced with this before. So the start date, which will be the date of the enrollment. The contact is you speaking to the client and assessing them. The date of contact will be the same here. and you'll select the appropriate current living situation. Now, the current living situation is where the client is staying or will be going to immediately during your conversation. So on the UD assessment, there's a question for prior living situation, which means essentially the night before. Current living situation is exactly where they are currently. So once they leave that office or they came from, they're going straight to the shelter, back to a place not meant for human habitation and so forth. We want to go ahead and make sure that we use where they're currently staying. In this case, I'll select place not meant for habitation. We have some additional fields here that you can add some details if you would like. And this field here is really used only a situation for like case conferencing. So you won't be using that in enrollment into an entry point. We have some follow-up questions. So if anyone's not familiar, these are not necessarily required, but if you do select an institutional situation or temporary permanent housing, which you can see highlighted up here and here, you would then complete the follow-up questions. Once you complete that sub-assessment, we'll click a save, and that will complete the current living situation for the client. So I do see a number of questions, so maybe we should pause for questions if there's any relevant to what we've covered already. I'm trying to take a look at any questions that we can about that sub-assessment that we want to address right now. We'll continue. So I'll just ask any panelists if we think there's something urgent, just stop me and we can address the question right away.
Just a reminder, guys, if you have questions, use the Q&A function because it's easier for us to see them if you use the Q&A function. Don't worry about like raising hands or anything like that, FYI.
Perfect. So the next two sub-assessments are the ones we covered really briefly in the PowerPoint, the coordinated entry event and the coordinated entry assessment. So again, we have a header. The entry event and the entry assessment will complete it for only the head of household. So no other adults, no other children. It will be only the head of household who's being enrolled in the program. Of course, if you're enrolling a youth or a minor head of household who's presenting by themselves, they'd be the head of household in that situation. But it'll be really critical to only select one entry event and choose an access event only. This will all be laid out in the training video as well as the training workflow document, but it certainly helps to see it a few times before we implement that process. So we'll click add. We have the start date here. We'll click the date event will be the same as the start date. The end date you can ignore. We're looking to move that somewhere lower, but we need the vendor to go ahead and help us change that around because it, but the end date you can just go ahead and ignore. The event for the entry points, you'll only be selecting an access event. So there's only 4 access events here. We absolutely, for an entry point, do not want to select any referral events. These will occur later in the process for a different workflow. More information about those workflows will come out to those who do work with the Housing Match team or housing providers. But for the purposes of this training, we're focusing on the entry point training only, and this is for the access events. We have 4 options, so you'll select only one option. There's the referral to prevention assistance. So client still has housing, but just needs some assistance to maintain that. We have problem solving, diversion, and rapid resolution. So it may be a normal process where you attempt diversion, and then after diversion, you attempt crisis needs assessment and a housing needs assessment. It may be tempting to say that you provided all 3 of these access events at once, but it'd be really critical to only select the one or the last one you provided. We don't want to have multiple records. We just want to have one access event per enrollment. So for example, if I attempted rapid resolution or diversion and it was successful, I would select diversion, select for the dependent question here, yes, as being the, the client was rehoused or was a successful diversion. This will be the only follow-up question we'll be actually utilizing in the entry point training. The additional ones down here are for a different process. It is kind of unfortunate that these are available for you to view at the entry point enrollment, but the only questions where we're looking at is the event and this follow-up question for if diversion was selected. Now, let's say that you attempted diversion and it was not successful. You would go ahead and then continue with the entry crisis needs assessment. So if this case, a client does have an immediate need, whether it be a medical, a domestic violence issue, needs to contact police or a trauma hotline, something that cuts off the assessment and they need to get some crisis need assistance immediately, you would select that. In the vast majority of cases, you would end up selecting the housing needs assessment, which means you're preparing or going to complete a VI SPDAT, TAE SPDAT, or an SPDAT with the VI versions with the clients. So in this case, I'll be selecting that the client will be completing a VI SPDAT assessment with us. Now, I did, of course, try diversion, but I'm only selecting one access event. In this case, ultimately going through the process, I'll be completing a VI SPDAT assessment with them. There's no follow-up questions for this particular event. Any kind of follow-ups will be detailed more closely in the workflow document. Once you complete that, we'll click Save. And then our next assessment will be the coordinated entry assessment. Again, this is completed for only the head of household who's enrolling into the program. And this is only completed if you are completing a crisis needs or a housing needs assessment. So if you have a successful diversion, you won't be completing this particular sub-assessment, or if you refer the client to prevention, you will also not be completing the sub-assessment. And we'll see why in a minute. So to complete this, we'll click Add. We'll have the date of assessment will once again be the day of their enrollment. The assessment location, you'll pick the correct entry point. The type, in this scenario, we'll say it's in person, but there's also phone and virtual as options. The assessment level is, again, we're just selecting whether it's a crisis needs or a housing needs assessment. In this case, it was a housing needs. They are expected to complete the VI SPDAT. And the prioritization status, we're always going to select of the two options placed on the prioritization list. Just by the virtue of enrolling into an entry point in both Balance of State and Maricopa, that will place you on a list for prioritization. The system acknowledges, and we acknowledge that if someone is enrolling in coordinated entry, they may need services. So by virtue of that, everyone will be placed on the prioritization list, and that will always be the appropriate answer. We'll pay heed to the do not use and do not use this field down here. And that will be the completion of the standard assessment for both Balance State and Maricopa. Now, that includes the VI SPDAT here. We don't train on the VI SPDAT on the HMIS team side here. I would refer to your coordinated assessment leads for any guidance on how to complete these fields. But this process for how to complete these should generally remain the same. It's just a different format. Now that we have completed the standard assessment, we do have a number of custom questions, and custom questions that many people are very familiar with. Those custom questions have just been switched to the third assessment. In this case, this is for the single adult side in Maricopa, but you can see all those custom questions for the client all the way down. The Family Housing Hub will have a different one. AZCH will have a different one as well. But you'll want to go ahead and refer to your guidance from your coordinated lead, whatever system you use, on how to best complete this assessment. But once everything is complete, you would go ahead and click Save and Exit. And in most cases, the client will be exited the same day, but you'll really be doing the exit for the client when their assessment process is complete. In this particular workflow is being considered complete that same day. We'll select the reason for leaving as they did complete a VI SPDAT, which we just did not show it. This is the same as their current living situation, so their destination is the same as their current living situation, a place not meant for habitation. And there's no longer any exit questions. So there used to be one or two. Those are no longer applicable, and you'll just go ahead and exit the client from the program. So I'll stop there and pause for questions, because I know there's quite a bit there, so we may want to clarify some things.
So one of the questions that came up a moment ago before getting into details of the questions with workflow, someone asked that we give just a very general explanation of what coordinated entry is for those who are new.
Yeah, so coordinated entry is just the process, and HUD has a way that they want continuous of care to have a way to assess clients in an equitable and equal way throughout the system. And coordinated entry is the approach to that. So essentially, in theory, most clients or all clients should be going through a core entry process so that we can ascertain what every client's needs are and then provide housing and shelter and services according to what their needs are. If there's no communication, if there's no coordination about how to assess clients in the continuum, then we're not able to effectively address those who are most in need. So that's it's just a way to assess clients equitably throughout the system and ensure that those who are most in need at that moment are being served appropriately.
Awesome. Some of the other questions that are coming in have some to do with the requirements around who we are requiring this training for. So I can address those really quickly. And then if there are specific like workflow questions, we can move into those. So just to clarify again, this training is going to be required for everyone that it is applicable for. So not necessarily everyone that has access to HMIS, but very specifically Maricopa County, if you are a user, or if you have users at your organization that have entered data as access to a coordinated entry point or to any housing program, they will be sent a blast and probably sent multiple reminders that they need to complete this training. Balance of state, if your users have entered data as access to any coordinated entry point or to very specifically housing providers for Arizona Complete Health. So in balance of state, only the housing providers for Arizona Complete Health. You'll be sent a blast email and follow-up email, so you shouldn't miss those. All right, we had a few other questions about the data entry documents that we have online on our website, and if those are going to be updated. We have not updated those yet, so they will be updated. So it's on our radar likely by the end of the week, and we'll send a blast and let everyone know as well when those are up and available. Okay. Again, just want to reemphasize, and I think this was touched on a little bit earlier, but Sam going through this piece today for coordinated entry points is a glimpse of the training that will be available, but this should be as a introduction so that you guys as our agency administrators have a little bit of a heads up and a leg up in an idea of what this looks like and what we're asking of coordinated entry points. But from the standpoint of us tracking who has taken this training and who hasn't, we will ask that everyone watch those videos who has access to a coordinated entry point and the housing providers as I described.
Sam, do you want me to take the screen back?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay. If no other questions around coordinated entry training workflow, do we want to move on to the next topic? All right. So next topic is an update for recording Latitude and Longitude for street outreach programs. Our community has investigated best practices and come to the conclusion that Google Maps is the best resource to use when looking for coordinates and for tracking them. So we'll go through that a little bit in more detail. The importance here, just want to emphasize really quickly that it's tracking to find clients for more contacts. So the street outreach folks who understand that they're going to have to probably build trust multiple times and meet with a client multiple times, being able to determine where they are and generally where they go is really important. And then also to track and alert clients if housing is available. So if they're put into a street outreach program, get prioritized for housing that they're able to find them. Thaddeus, can I share my screen really quickly?
Sure thing.
Okay. Just to emphasize the importance of this really briefly, in Maricopa, we have a street outreach viewer. So our street outreach viewer tool allows us to put in graphical format exactly where people are going and where, based on that latitude and longitude that we're putting into HMIS, putting a report together that then puts that into graphical format. So I won't go into too much detail here, with the outreach viewer, other than it is just an extremely helpful tool on the Maricopa side, being able to filter by service date, being able to look at encounters, weekly by name list, and the clients who fall under the categories of homeless or non-chronically, chronically homeless and non-chronically homeless. Okay. So best practices of our street outreach work group has worked with a TA, and they have said that they would very strongly suggest, if it is at all possible, to record the latitude and longitude while you are at the location with your client. That is preferable. So again, they're requesting that you use Google Maps only for consistency in reporting. And then this is just a reminder as well that when you're looking at HMIS and looking for the exact format that needs to be put in, it is very particular that we want for latitude for it to be 33 dot and then up to 5 decimal points afterwards, and longitude in the format that's listed here as well. Next slide. All right, so brief tutorial here for Google Maps. If you aren't as familiar, I don't have the ability to show you on my phone, but have a screenshot here. If you are using a Google Maps app, it's recommended that you turn your location on. If that's something that you're not comfortable with, then that's also okay. If you turn your location on, it may automatically drop a pin. So in this picture, that's the little red mark here. But otherwise, you can drop a pin yourself by holding your finger down on a place on the map, and then it will ask if you would like to drop a pin. You can go to our next slide here. Okay, so from there, the recommendation again from the community is that you scroll down to expand where the information is on that same page in Google Maps, and copy and paste the coordinates that are listed at the bottom. So you can hold down your finger on the coordinates, and if you hold that down for just a few seconds, you can choose copy. It should come up as an option. The recommendation here is to then use either an internal notes on your phone. iPhones have notes, I think, by default, and Android phones have something similar. There are also apps that you can download that have that ability as well, but that you are then choosing the note, holding down your finger, and then choosing paste. Recommendation again from community and having these conversations back and forth, emphasizing the importance of this data and really being able to determine where clients are, and being able to track that definitively becomes really important. So they've asked that you then take the notes, and if you have the ability on your smartphone to then email them to yourself, that you are copying and pasting them from an email directly into HMIS. They said that there's some back and forth about when you're able to write down the coordinates, if you will, and then put them into HMIS later, that they've seen that the data doesn't come across as correctly because numbers can be missed. So best practice here, if using an app, is to then copy and paste the coordinates directly from an email into HMIS. Okay, this one is just as a reminder. If you are recording latitude and longitude from your web browser, that you can use google.com/maps, search for the cross streets or the general location, and zoom into the location. You want to double click on a specific point on the map that you're trying to get the latitude and longitude for, and you'll see a pop-up with that latitude and longitude at the bottom of your screen. It will also appear in the URL on the address bar. So remembering again, just to copy and paste the very specific portion up to 5 decimal points for HMIS. Pause here and ask for questions. Does look like we have one question that's come in. So for tracking, does this include balance of state? Balance of state, I would say that this is very highly recommended. This has been something that Maricopa County has put in place, but that should be highly recommended in balance of state as well from a continuity standpoint. Any other questions for tracking coordinates for street outreach? Okay. All right, any other questions, parting questions, thoughts about any of the pieces that we've covered for today? We have a question around coordinates of what happens if a client is living in the forest. So if you are using your phone and your phone is getting reception in the forest, then you could still use Google Maps app. That would be a really good tool in that scenario, because it would either track your current location or you would be able to pinpoint exactly where you are, even from like a general standpoint within the forest or mountains. The piece about searching for a cross street might not be as relevant if you're using a web browser. So you would have to zoom into generally within the forest where you think that you encountered that person, and then dropping a pin. It won't give you a cross streets or address, but it will give you the latitude and longitude.
I mean, hopefully you're not lost yourself in the forest. So if you know where you are in the forest, then you should be able to hopefully identify that in a map later, or at least somewhere as close as you can, like Lori said. But don't get lost in the forest, please.
And without reception, that wouldn't be good. Yeah, if there's no service, definitely you want to go back to the web browser and just be able to try to pinpoint as close to as accurate as you can where you were. All right, well, if there's no other questions, Thaddeus, do you want to wrap up for us?
Sure thing. Thanks so much for coming. Expect in the next about half hour an email that will give you a chance to fill out a survey and say what you thought we did well or didn't do well, or what other future topics you would like us to go over in the future. And thank you so much for your time. And we hope you have a great day, and please stay safe and stand by for all the follow-up videos and instructions we're going to be sending out as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.